Well, yeah. So I'm sat here and I'm talking to my friend Ricky D Phillips. He's a best-selling historian and author, the man behind First Casualty and Letters from Stanley, and many other fantastic books about the Argentine War or the Falklands War, and also wrote a very good book about Hannibal, General Hannibal, and the what's that called? The Pubic Wars.
The Punic
That's not
Wars, yeah.
Punic.
Yeah. My claim to fame, hello, Blair. My claim is, is finding Hannibal's first battlefield, amongst many
That's
other
right.
things,
Yeah.
on the Battle of the Tagus from 220 BC. So, yeah, a lot of good history. Some of the best history is ancient history, but then the modern stuff probably sells better sometimes. So, I'd love
Yeah.
to delve back into ancient as well. But history is history. If it gets you, you're there, aren't you? You got the bug, and you follow it through to the end.
The Pubic Wars. I'm not going to live that down. Yeah, they were fought up at the Westport, in 64 AD.
It's a new angle. That's all I'm going to say.
All joking aside, these are fantastically, very well written books, and Ricky decided that he wanted to interview me about a subject that I've been deeply passionate about for quite a while, and that is the subject of Mars and the relationship of Earth to the rest of the cosmos. And I can kind of give some insight into that now, if you like.
By all means, please do.
Well, it all started really when I did the Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth presentations. And that was largely to do with a couple of authors, Brinsley, Lapoire Trench, and David Icke mostly, and also Robert Temple with, I think it was called The Sirius Mystery, if I remember correctly. It's all focused on that. How it actually originally started was when I was on the podcast Unslaved, and I was going to do a presentation on Mars for them. And initially, one of the hosts, David Whitehead, expressed an interest in it. So then I started putting the presentation together about Mars. And I worked on it for weeks and weeks and weeks and said, okay, I'm very close now, because I was going to go on his channel, Truth Warrior. I was like, okay, I'm just about ready. You don't have to do anything. I've done all the work for you. You just have to go there and offer your opinion based upon what I've written. So you just have to chime in, basically. So I've done all of it, And he's like, oh, no, I don't want to do it and all that sort of thing. And maybe you should start a channel and do it on your channel, which is exactly what I did. But I didn't take it too well. He'd basically jerked me off for the past 2 months or so. So I told him to basically go fuck off in the strongest possible terms. And I've never been on Unslaved ever since then, unsurprisingly.
There's a few podcasts like that. You tend to do the podcast circuit, as you know I do, and some people you're like, I would love to work with that guy again, and then other guys you're like, that it got weird, or it got we were all right on camera, and then afterwards we had a chat, and it was like, actually I thought you were you were a dick or something. But I suppose, if I may, I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing, one of the reasons I wanted to interview, obviously we are friends, which people know, and we're two historians who do totally different things, and I think sometimes the stuff you do is fascinating. And for those watching your show, they don't know this, but off screen, Blair's really looked into this. This is something that occupies 90 what percent of his, he doesn't sleep. For those watching this, he does not sleep. I know this for a fact. I get messages at 3, 4, 5 in the morning sometimes. I had this great which is what we do. Which is what we do. It's what I've done it 8 million times, pad and pen by the bed and wake up. And so for those who are wondering, what's Ricky doing here, or something like that, we're two friends, we're two historians looking at very different things, but also, I suppose I'm talking to the audience here that, I want Blair to be able to have this opportunity to say, here's what I'm doing, here's how I'm doing. As a historian, you can always just end up talking to yourself very easily. And it's a recipe for married life sometimes, being a historian, just talking to yourself all the time. But it's about putting yourself over, having the opportunity to say something that you sometimes don't have the opportunity to say. And also, as a historian, as a layman, I want to be able to give you the opportunity to express, and also want to, be the layman's questionnaire, if you will, and introduce what you do and why you do it. Because I think one of the biggest things is a lot of people might turn around and go, "What, are you a conspiracy theorist?" Let's say, and are you a flat earther? These are the kind of questions that people ask. And so I suppose what would you say if I was to ask you an opening question, a layman's opening question? If someone wants to say, okay, you're a historian, but you're doing, this, you're doing, you've mentioned things like Mars, Atlantis, Hollow Earth. You're not a flat earther. Let me get this out straight. I know this for a fact. There is not a flat earther. What would you say to someone who said, "Are you just another conspiracy theorist?" You've mentioned words like David Icke. That word never comes gently. There's a lot of connotations. There's a lot of prejudice against someone like David Icke. I mean, one of my sort of best podcasts was with Chris Thrall on Brought the T-shirt, who was UK Veteran of the Year last year. He's now rowing the Atlantic, but yet a multiple guest on Chris Thrall has been David Icke. So if someone is to say to you, "Are you a conspiracy theorist?" What do you feel about being called a conspiracy theorist? How do you answer that when sort of the word conspiracy theory comes in?
I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. I'm just a historian. No, I mean, I'm talking to the audience here. No, not at all. I mean, I read David Icke's works, but I read everyone's works because I like to have a balanced viewpoint. And, I got a lot of the theories on Mars from The Biggest Secret. A lot of actually what went into the Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth presentations came from Children of the Matrix and The Biggest Secret. When you watch that string of presentations, it went up to 8.3. So it was an extensive presentation. So
for the audience.
I'm sorry?
These are David Icke books for the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah. Children of the Matrix and The Biggest Secret. I used those two as primary sources for that presentation. So, yeah, I used Icke, but also used Brinsley, Lepar Trench, and also used Robert Temple as well. And, a lot of what Icke says is very intriguing, but, a lot of it is a bit tinfoil hat territory, just putting it mildly. I do respect David Icke's body of work. Having said that, he's putting a lot of effort and he's putting a lot of energy, and he's obviously put in endless hours into his research, and he truly believes what he's saying. The thing about David Icke is he is a true believer in his theories. I don't think he's a charlatan or a fraud in any sense of the word whatsoever. I think he is a man of integrity and belief, and I think he truly does believe what he's saying, and I think he does offer valuable insights in certain ways. And it would actually be an honor to talk to him and interview him if I ever get the chance to do so. But at the same time, I'm not 100% on board with everything he says. I mean, I think the stuff that he says about like the royals and all this and about reptilians is a bit. This is where you're kind of losing the audience here, Dave.
Yeah, it's kind of okay. We just, you went from okay, that's feasible, that's possible. We'll see where you're going there to what the hell. And I'm glad you said that, because I think that's one of the things when you say David Icke, with prejudice, I went and looked at a lot of his stuff, and I actually thought, here is an intelligent man who's looked for some answers. I don't agree with all of his conclusions or anything like that, but he's looked for some answers. And as you said, that's probably a really good way of putting it. He's not a charlatan. Whether or not he's right, he believes in it. And I think, to do what you do, you have to look at the alpha and omega. You have to look at every single thing in between. I know there's other names. Graham Hancock is a name you mention often, who's a very intelligent man, who's a really, really, really big seller on this stuff, and very clever. And obviously I've had a look at a lot of the stuff he does on Twitter as well and what have you. I'm big on Twitter. He's bigger than me, I think, so people like what he's putting out there. But when you say, when we come back to conspiracy theory, now my understanding is, and again, this is just to square this up with everyone, the difference, say, between yourself and a David Icke, you're not saying here is what to believe. You're saying
No.
here is an interesting subject. It's largely, I suppose, the biggest question that anyone ever asked, because they've been asking it for so many centuries, millennia. You know, where did we come from? What's the background behind us? And I think even if you look at films, you probably know I'm a massive fan of the Alien films. You know, Prometheus proposed this idea, this sort of genesis of identity. Where did we come from? You know, is it the stars? Are we homegrown? Is it evolution? Is it what have you? And as a historian, you've taken this on to look at it, which is great, because I know your work and I know how thorough you are with these things. And you're the kind of guy who doesn't sleep until you get your answers. Be that history of, be it Edinburgh, William Wallace, other things that you've done. So, but this is a different thing. How does a historian get into this? Be it, you know, Mars, Atlantis, which Atlantis is the single most written about subject in the world. I don't know how. Napoleon is second, Jesus is third, if you want your stats. But how does a serious, and not to say this isn't serious, but a lot of people go, what is this? How does a serious historian get into this genre more than, I don't know, you know, more than, say, be it William Wallace, like your works there, or Falklands, like myself, or anything like that, or Hannibal? Where does this come in? Where's the first thing that you go, there's something here?
Well, what I'd say is, having been on both sides of academia, a serious historian wouldn't get into this stuff because he would put his career in serious jeopardy by approaching such fringe subjects to begin with. You know, I mean, a serious historian in terms of like somebody who's like a tenured professor or somebody who's got a serious position at a big university or like Oxford or Cambridge wouldn't touch this stuff with a barge pole.
This is
you know,
P45 stuff, you know, if you're a top professor. But it needs asking. The question, they're still relevant questions. I mean, it needs asking. People forget this. They go, well, evolution answers it. Evolution is a theory.
No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
Evolution doesn't answer anything.
Well, I mean, it is to me, it's an answer, but it is still, whatever you believe, it is still a theory. It's not proven. Evolution is just like gravity is a theory. It's there. You know, you drop something, it goes bang on the floor. But gravity is a theory.
When it comes to Darwin, I'm not going to take anyone seriously who was shagging his own auntie. All right, that's a big cut-off point for me. You know, I mean, was it his cousin or his aunt? Anyone who screws their own relatives is a fucking nutcase, in my opinion. But it's true. Look it up. You know, I'm not. You know, how do you get interested in this kind of thing? I don't know. Just for me, I tend to have a bit of an obsessive nature. You know, like how you have like an addictive nature sometimes. Like you get addicted to things, kind of thing. Like in Trainspotting 2, so be addicted to something else. You know, and when Renton's given what's his name, Spud, that pep talk on top of Arthur's seat. But I have a kind of obsessive personality, and I'm into mysteries and secrets, and it's one of the biggest mysteries and the biggest secrets of all. I mean, the origins of humanity and the cosmos, and what the hell happened to Mars, because obviously something fucking happened to Mars. I think it all actually started with Atlantis, to be honest with you, and then I began to put it together from there, that there's connections between Atlantis and Mars, and then that ties into Hollow Earth, and then it ties into the missing Canaan project and missing 411, and that ties into Nordic and Irish myths and all this sort of thing, and then that ties into what Lou Baldwin was saying in Mars and the Lost Planet Man. So it's about, as David Icke likes to say, joining the dots, connecting the dots. And it very much is. And once you start to pull one thread in this tapestry, you know, you begin to realize that this is very complicated and it's all interconnected. And it really is all interconnected, you know. Then I started getting into... Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, well, one thing, of course, that is mentioned, which we may come on to later, which is something I mentioned to you, of course, and you're saying that there's something missing here. And I said, have you heard of World War Zero? And of course, this went off in millions of directions. But it's fascinating because there is solid archaeological evidence. And World War Zero, again, if people haven't heard of this, bear with us, we'll come back onto it. But World War Zero is spoken about in serious academia. It's become the new Troy. It's become the gold dust. I mean, you know, so there is a lot in that, and obviously when you went down that particular rabbit hole, you came up with loads more than I did, and
Yeah.
because I know you, because you would,
Oh yeah, I mean, I deep dive into all this stuff. I mean, I've got more Steve Preston books than any other author, just from World War Zero, and just expanded from there.
So it cost you a lot of
And
money.
well, yeah, but I don't mind that. I mean, if something only costs you money, you still got it cheaply, in my opinion. But
Well,
what was I
not
going to say?
the price, yeah.
Well, the thing is, like Graham Hancock, I think comes very close to World War Zero in a lot of ways with America Before, which I listened to. I listened to the audiobook of America Before, and his new series coming out October the 16th. That'll be me resubscribing to Netflix for the first time in, I don't know, about 5 years or something like that. But the one thing that would get me to resubscribe to Netflix would be a special on Graham Hancock, and Ancient Apocalypse and Ancient Aliens and all the rest. And when I saw that trailer, I was like, can't wait for that. Like, Hancock is a very, very talented author, in my opinion, a very talented researcher, and the one thing I would say with Hancock is he's not gone back and visited Mars. So that's another reason why I've gone into Mars so deeply. I almost feel like I have to pick up where Hancock left off, because now he's moved on to other things. He's moved on to like America, not just North America, but like the Americas in general, Central and South America, North America, all these sites and all this, which ties into the work of Rita Jean Morin and other authors like that. The Lovelock Cave and I think it's in Nevada, whatever it is, somewhere in like the deserts.
On this one, but on.
Sorry?
As you may have the advantage of me on this one. I don't know.
Oh,
I've heard the name of that cave actually. You're not.
yeah,
You're not
Lovelock
on
Cave.
Mars. I've heard it, but
Yeah.
So
But Hancock's gone off in that direction. So then Mars, he started the whole thing on Mars, and then from Hancock, I moved on to Hoagland and Mike Bara as well, and other authors like Mark Carlotto and John Brandenburg, and all this kind of thing. So all the sources are way up there. I mean, Mars occupies the highest shelf on my bookshelf. I mean, because that's like the top priority, I guess, at the moment. But there's so many authors who've written about this, and the whole Atlantis Mars connection. There's definitely a connection there, and it also ties in with Commons Beaumont, with the mysterious comet and the riddle of the Earth. When Beaumont is talking about meteorites and asteroids fueling the planet, he's the only author. He's the only one who has come out and suggested this. And then when you read in the back end of the Mars Mystery with Hancock, he's talking about there's a constant cycle of comets and asteroids going in and around the Earth all the time. But the only part that Hancock sees is the potential danger. He doesn't see what Beaumont sees, that actually it's not, strictly speaking, a danger. It's actually a necessity, because it's actually these celestial bodies that are fueling the planet all the time with resources and with oxygen and with minerals. If these comets stopped coming, we'd be dead. And only Beaumont figured that out. Only Beaumont is the one to even suggest this.
But then
that's why
you and I obviously spoke about Clement Beaumont in a previous podcast, and we were spitballing, we were actively drinking beer and just chatting away about him. And his history was well researched. Most of his conclusions, I think we agreed most of his conclusions were wrong, or he tied one thing in history up to another thing and said this is the same thing, and we had a great sort of spitball session over that, and concluded that a lot of what Beaumont said wasn't right. But I think that we said 10 out of 10 for effort here, and he's got good things. He just picks up a good thing and then he sort of runs 100 miles an hour into a brick wall with it. Sometimes he doesn't get that. I mean, who are the big names in this? You've mentioned Hancock. I mean, I'd love to see you in a chat with Graham Hancock. I mean, you're sort of he's the one you seem to follow more closely. I remember a time when you said Hoagland was closer to who do you think's more along your train of thought? If someone liked this person's book, they'll like what you're doing.
I would say Hoagland. I'm more along Hoagland's train of thought, because the thing I don't like about Hancock is Well, at least back in okay, I've got to give him the benefit of the doubt. With the Mars Mystery, he wrote it in 1996, 1997. This was quite a long time ago, right?
Mhm.
With the more recent books with Hancock, he seems to be far more decisive. Like I noticed when I listened to America before, he wasn't holding back anymore. He was just outright fucking saying it. You know, whereas with the Mars Mystery back in 96, 97, he seemed to be a bit on the fence. Like, it might be this, or it might be that, or it could be, or it might... I'm like, stop playing the fucking modal game and just, you know, get to the bottom line. And he's awfully a bit wordy as well, and a little bit flowery and all this. But, you know, I think his style, based upon what I heard, you know, listening to America before, has greatly improved and, you know, has become far more decisive. I think over time, you know, with academia treating him like shit, basically, and castigating him and trying to ostracize him and coming after him, has hardened him quite a bit since 1997. And he's just like, fuck it, I'm just going for it now, you know. But I do identify more with Hoagland, because Hoagland is straight up saying it from the jump. You know, he's just saying, and a lot of my research into Hoagland wasn't just books; it was actually his radio interviews with Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM, which I've actually featured on my channel, and I'm going to feature another one of those broadcasts. But also, he was talking about the moon as well as. Sorry,
I have heard some of those actually.
Yeah. But you know, Hoagland's was much more decisive. And as much as I liked Hancock, I didn't like him being mealy-mouthed and indecisive. You know, whereas Hoagland was not being mealy-mouthed or indecisive. He was just, in fact, if anything, he was being kind of aggressive. You know, Hoagland has never really held back. I mean, he was more assertive than aggressive, but still, he wasn't, you know, he wasn't being indecisive. He was saying, this is what they're fucking doing. And this is shady as fuck, and I'm pissed off about it. It was more direct.
So when we look at, and again, I mean, I might have people say, "Oh, Rick's on that. What's he and this historian talking about?" So again, it's you've turned your historical talents and your I'm trying to think of the word, but I don't want to use obsession, but your ability to outwork even yourself sometimes, you know, because you don't sleep. I know this. You've turned a historian's talents to the biggest question out there: Mars, Atlantis, the Hollow Earth, etc. Unlike a lot of those, you mentioned that some of them aren't holding back. They're going, look, this is the thing. You're not saying believe this, believe A, believe B. You're saying, okay, the subject is big enough, it's huge, it's big enough that people are interested. Like I said, Atlantis, the most written about subject in the world, which is, it sounds ridiculous, but it is. And you're saying, okay, so what's behind it? What's the truth behind it? How does the classical historical method, the academic historical method, how does this apply to what you're doing? And later on, I'm going to go into sort of, you know, what you found, what you think you might find, where to look, etc. But how does the historical method go into what you're doing in a subject which is, you know, it's out there on a lot of people's radar. A lot of people absolutely love it, but as you said yourself, there's a stack load of source material out there. How does the historical method of a historian go into, you know, something as shall we say weird and wonderful as this collection of subjects, which is a massive collection of subjects?
Yeah. Well, let me sort of answer something that you asked me earlier on that occurs to me I didn't really answer. You asked me to name big names. Okay, Commons Beaumont, definitely a big one. Colonel Ellie Waddell, another one. Ignatius Donnelly, Anna Wilkes with Ireland, Ur of the Chaldees. Rita Jean Morin would be another one. Graham Hancock, absolutely. You know, Mike Bara is more on the alien side of things, but those are some big names to start with. Getting into them. Did I say Conor McDarry? I think I did. There's also him. With the whole Atlantis thing. How do you get? I don't know. You just kind of pick up one book and look at the bibliography. I mean, a lot of what I did actually started off with Michael Tazarian. I have to say as well, if he ever sees this, my problem has never been with Michael Tazarian. My problem was with David Whitehead. To this day, I don't have a problem with Michael Tazarian. I still don't. I still recommend his work and I still read his work. And I started largely with him because I was listening to his Red Ice radio interviews that you can get off archive.org. Then I had the privilege of being on Unslaved a number of times, and I'm still grateful at least to Michael, for having me on that show, because I think he runs it. But because I fell out with Whitehead, he won't have me back on, which is fine. That's fair enough. But I still don't have a problem with Michael Nazarian. Honestly don't. But it all started really with him. My interest in Atlantis. And by the way, why do people forget about Lemuria at the same time? Because it was Atlantis and Lemuria. There was actually the two of them. One of them was in the Atlantic, and one of them was in the Pacific. But both were just as important as each other. For some reason, people forget all about Lemuria. But that ties into the whole Hollow Earth thing.
I've not heard of Lemuria, but I do know, and again, probably going back to a lot of my Hannibal work, Ancient Origins is a great website for this kind of stuff. They look for proper archaeological evidence of things. And so when I did a lot of Hannibal work, Ancient Origins was a massive thing, and I worked with there's like Dr. Mickey Pistorius and people like that who are, top academic people. And yet Atlantis, again, we find Atlantis becomes one of their biggest subjects. And this is, again, top people. And they're finding loads of things under the ocean. And they're saying, could it be Atlantis? Could it be Atlantis? The other place, my apologies, you said what is it called?
Lemuria.
Lemuria, right? No one's ever written about that. I mean, if me being a historian who always looks and thinks I could write that, but it's a waste of a year of my life because no one will buy it, but I like it, and I don't have that luxury right now, I would sit and go, that's good. That is good. That is money, because if Atlantis is the most written about subject, this is Atlantis 2 that no one's heard of. I'd be thinking that way, but I mean, there's certainly a lot. The more that I've known you and the more that I've given time to a subject which, okay, potentially I wouldn't have given time to. And I get that there's things there. And I know you have a t-shirt, NASA, never a straight answer.
So I should have wore it. I forgot about that.
Yeah, you should have. You should have. So if we stick to Mars, Mars is a very tangible. Atlantis, very written about subject. There is stuff under the water. Is it Atlantis? Isn't it? Where is it? Where was it? It's so well covered.
Well,
there is something. There will be something.
Well, I would suggest
Mars. Sorry, if we take this to Mars, what is it about Mars? What do you see? What do you know? And again, because you're very studied in this, what do you see in Mars that other people aren't seeing? What's wrong? When a historian sees that something's wrong, we instinctively, gravitate towards it. And we try and piece bits together, and then we realize what's missing, or sometimes it's an accident, sometimes it's an oversight, sometimes we don't know. Sometimes someone's hidden something, which probably brings you back to a bit of NASA. What is it about Mars? If you're describing to the layman why you look time and again at Mars, which we always have as a human race, what is it about Mars? If you had to explain to someone who knew nothing barring it's a big red planet and was in War of the Worlds, why do you question anything about Mars? What is to question?
It goes back to ancient Egypt, because ancient Egypt was a continuation of Mars on Earth. I sincerely believe, and the whole Phoenician thing ties into all that. But before I go into that, let me just say this: if you really want to find Atlantis, I would suggest looking in the middle of the Atlantis Ocean. Atlantis Ocean, yeah, the Atlantic Ocean. Look there. Look at the ocean that bears the name. As I always say, Rick, everything in life is self-defining. You want to find Atlantis? Look at the ocean of Atlantis. Look there. That's where you look. And one thing I'll give Hancock credit for is he's often went underwater and done deep dives. I mean, I don't talk about deep dives like you and I talking about this stuff, over StreamYard. I'm talking about deep dives. Is actually went diving in the ocean with his wife innumerable times looking for these wrecks. And he's included that in his presentations and in his books and all this sort of thing. So you got to give Hancock credit there. He's actually
doing that. Yeah, I'd
deep dive
down, but I'm not. I like to be able to put my feet on something.
Yeah, but ancient Egypt is the answer to that question, because I think everything interconnects through ancient Egypt. And as I'm going through the presentations I'm working on right now with Hancock, he's really hammering that point home. connection between the Giza Plateau, the Sphinx, the pyramids on, the Giza Plateau in ancient Egypt, and how they possibly connect with Cydonia and Elysium. Let's not forget about Elysium. In the same way that we don't forget about Lemuria, let's not forget about Elysium, the pyramids, these huge pyramids on Mars. Some of them three-sided, some of them four-sided, some of them even five-sided, like the DNM pyramid, named after Vincent de Pietro and Greg Molinar. Two researchers who worked alongside Hoagland and worked for NASA. So it really is ancient Egypt. That's the connection. That's the intersection point. And interestingly, something go back to Michael Tazarian, he said it was that those who were expelled from Egypt, they had a motto, and the motto was, "The world is not enough." And it's referenced to one of the James Bond films. There's a Bond film called "The World Is Not Enough," and that is the actual motto of the Bond family. And that was something that got my attention years ago with Tazarian saying that those who were kicked out of Egypt, those who were expelled from Egypt, they would not take the whole world over what they lost in Egypt. But then I got to thinking on my own, what world is he talking about? Is he talking about this one, the world that they lost as in ancient Egypt, or is he talking about the world they lost as in that one out there, the morning star, Mars? Or is he talking about Horus?
Well, see, I looked at one of the interesting things. You see the three pyramids at Giza, and what's fascinating, and it is fascinating to me as a military historian, is that these are repeated in the three pyramids together are repeated in three places around the world, which line up exactly with the stars of Orion's belt. But then what's absolutely amazing is you see almost the carbon copy of those three pyramids on Mars. And that's really weird. I think, I was thinking about this the other day. I was at my second place outside St. Andrews, and I was looking up at the sky, as Orion's belt. And weirdly enough, I see a thing, an asteroid or whatever, moving across the sky, and it just literally almost went through Orion's belt. And I was just looking up thinking, bloody hell, you look up there, you'd be amazed what we don't know. The sky at night is the most amazing thing. It can just draw you in. And so without saying anything is one thing or another thing, because I'm not studied enough to say it, to me as the layman, it looks fascinating. But coming back to the layman's thing, so Mars, what are we missing? What's
everything?
What's on Mars, and where do you mentioned NASA never a straight answer? We've got things like the famous picture of the face on Mars. We've got we've got lots of knowledge on Mars. You can see what Mars would have looked like when it had water. There are specific continents on Mars. There's a lot of landfall, waterfall, etc. It's a fascinating planet. What is it about Mars? What are we missing? What are you and other people seeing? What fuels the idea that anything ever happened on Mars, barring it's a rock?
Well, the artificial artifacts really is what. Hang on, are you hearing a lot of feedback when I'm giving my answers here?
No.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, I just sort of heard a bit of feedback there, but well, really, it's the artificial artifacts at places like Cydonia and Elysium and the face on Mars, because NASA, especially when you read the Dark Mission book by Mike Bara and Richard Hoagland, you find that NASA, and also Hancock covers this as well in the Mars Mystery, but NASA has behaved so shadily over that, and there's been so much sabotage around Cydonia. It's almost like they found something that they didn't really want to find. And then you read about the Brookings Report, which was written during the Cold War. And basically the gist of the Brookings Report was, whatever you find on Cydonia, don't tell the public about it. And they've followed that doctrine ever since. It's like, because even though NASA was founded in 1958 and it's a government agency, it's publicly funded. But just because it's publicly funded doesn't mean you need to tell the public anything. And they've gone out of their way to not tell the public anything. They've tried to hoard it all to themselves, and they've been super suspicious. And you hear in the Art Bell interviews with Richard Hoagland, and I've posted these all on the channel, there have been numerous sabotage efforts, with the orbiters and the satellites and all this that they're sending out to Mars, and they've sabotaged their own equipment so many times. Well, not necessarily NASA as a whole organization, but insiders in NASA have sabotaged. Yeah, or someone, particularly the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory seems to be heavily into this, and then there's what Mike Bara writes about them in his books. If you want to know, well, I'll cover that eventually down the line. But there's been so many sabotage, efforts, and many of them have succeeded. And then you get the images, and like they don't want to release the images, and then they release like modified images and all this kind of thing. There's been so much chicanery and bullshit, and folk like Hoagland have been tearing their fucking hair out. And Hoagland's been on Coast to Coast AM dozens of times talking about this. There's no shortage of it, But anyway, go ahead. What was your question?
Sorry, my question. So, I mean, I suppose it fuels something if there's, and the public, if there's something there which we're told Mars is an empty rock, and we go, okay, cool, it's an empty rock. Maybe there was some bacteria there or something, and they've looked into this. But then the people telling you that are shown to be, if not lying, then shady, then what have you. It does fuel someone, and particularly the historian goes, why? Because we think that way. What would you say is again, I'm talking as the layman here, what is the biggest thing that comes up if you were to explain something so that perhaps in your world and field of study is obvious, like you'd almost forgotten it because it's that blatant, but Joe Average is watching this podcast and going, like what's happened? I mean, I've looked into the face on Mars, and you can go into that if you like. And I saw there was an altered image going, oh no, it was just this, it was shadow, but then they look back and it wasn't, which makes you think, okay, it made me think Blair might have something here. But when you talk about sabotage and shadiness, what's the biggest classic example of this?
Well, they mess with their own equipment. Like sometimes orbiters will get to within range of Mars, and then they'll switch off the transmission, and it'll come back on again. Or sometimes the orbiter will just go missing. It's right there. I think it was Orbiter 9, I think that happened to. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I've covered it all on the channel. I'll cover it more extensively in the future. But even Hancock was covering it in the Mars Mystery, the amount of obfuscation and shadiness around, especially Cydonia. It's Cydonia that drives them nuts. It's specifically that one thing that they don't want any more light put upon. Like, what was his name?
Cydonia. Sorry, my apologies. I'm just getting it. Explain Cydonia. Imagine someone's watching this that's never heard of Cydonia. What? Now, as far as I understand, it's one of the big sort of continents on Mars. That's correct?
No, Cydonia was a region in the north of Mars, close to the oceans, the northern oceans of Mars when they existed. So it was actually close to the sea, which makes it even more interesting because of when you factor in on Earth, the whole thing to do with the oceans and the whole thing about the hollow Earth and the abyss and all this kind of thing. The oceans are really the key to everything. The key to any planet is its oceans, more than anything else. I was going to say Dr. Michael Mallon is the one who controlled the images coming from Cydonia, and he was the one who was like fucking around with them and all this kind of thing. And at one point, apparently, there was a conference in the 1980s where two of Hoagland's team were trying to get people interested in Cydonia specifically, and they were calling people over, and Dr. Mike Mallon was grabbing a megaphone and shouting at people on a megaphone.
I've heard of this. He was actually being utterly abusive in people's face to the point their ears were ringing so no one could hear and chasing them out the room, wasn't he?
I mean, somebody's carrying on like that, and this is the guy who's in charge of all the images coming from the NASA satellites, or that was the case back in 1996, 1997 when Hancock wrote the Mars Mystery kind of thing, and Hoagland's talking about the same thing. So Hoagland and Hancock are saying the same thing. Sorry?
So I'm saying it's not how a top academic works or acts. If I did that or if you did that, people said, this guy's a cowboy. He's not answering the questions. Why not? You get a megaphone. And like I said, I've seen this myself, so I know this is true. That he did literally get entirely abusive and literally screamed down their ears with a megaphone until their ears were ringing and he was chasing them out the room. And
somebody's and this is the guy who's controlling the images coming from Mars. This, or at least was back then. I don't know if that's still the case, but this was a guy who was in control. This was the case when the Mars Mystery was written, because I'm still working on that now. I've got a number of presentations in the pipeline, but and also Dark Mission. I'm still working on that. The chapters there, more of that's going to come out in the future. It's still a work in progress. I don't know everything yet. I know a lot, but I don't know everything. This will all come out when the presentations come out. But if somebody's acting like that, and this is the guy who's actually in charge of the images, you got to be what? Why is this guy specific? And also, they were going to use the Clementine camera, the Clementine probe, which they used on the moon to great effect. They were going to use that on Mars until somebody stepped in at NASA, made sure that Malin and his inferior equipment was sent instead, because he's their boy, so or he's got something over all them or something.
This prompts a question: what? Why? Is there technology there that we don't know? Is there something? Now, why would you bother sending a mission to Mars pretending you're trying when actually you have no intention of trying? And I mean, I used to do a lot of work with, I didn't work for them, but with Astrium, which is the UK sort of part of the European Space Agency. And I mean, the sheer money that goes into this is vast. It is vast, satellite technology. So it's and this is a question. It's worth that to send something all the way to Mars to say we tried, is it? And then to give them a load of bullshit. But obviously they're looking for something that maybe they've not found too. Do you think that these are the powers that be under the overarching branch of NASA, shall we say, are looking for something they haven't found, or do you think they found it?
I think they have found it, but they don't want us to know about it. It's really the real explanation there. I think they want to send probes, because the thing is, NASA is, remember, a government agency, but it's publicly funded. So they have to be seen to be attempting to do something to justify their own existence. But if they're sabotaging their own equipment, or apparently sabotaging it, and they chalk it up to the great galactic ghoul, the big monster around Mars ate the equipment, like the dog ate their homework kind of thing. But, there's... Well, it's possible evidence that some of these probes that were supposedly lost are still transmitting. It's just that we're not getting it. So what they're saying is that the probe was lost when really it wasn't lost, and it's just sending the information back to those higher up the chain, and those lower in the chain think that it was lost. The thing that Hoagland and Hancock both repeatedly say is that 90-95% of Mars are dedicated, hardworking people who are not in on it. It's only like the top shady 1% who are in all this shit. And Mike Bara goes into all that in his works about who really was behind NASA and what their potential agenda is, and we'll get into that in the future. And it ties in the whole Kennedy assassination as well.
Really?
One of the reasons one of the reasons possibly why they gave Kennedy the special haircut was he was going to do joint missions to the moon with the Soviet Union. And they didn't want that. They didn't want to cooperate with the Soviet Union because they didn't want the Soviets getting their hands on American technology and all this kind of thing. And they didn't want the Soviets learning American, military secrets. And there is a danger there, let's be honest. In the middle of a Cold War, which could turn hot at any moment, you don't really want to be sharing military secrets with the other side. That's kind of a stupid thing to do. But, this literally cost him his life. And the focus back then was more the moon rather than Mars. But
if I may, sorry, interrupting that. And there's a few things, and again, I'm gonna say this in my capacity as military historian. I know for a fact that Werner von Braun, famous of course for the B-2, and a lot of people would know. Obviously, he was the man behind sending the first rockets up to space and up to Mars, etc. When he was asked, and this is referenceable, when he was asked where this came from, the wonder weapons, the ideas to do everything he did and onto the space program. Werner von Braun famously said, we had help from, and he went, up there, people up there. He didn't say who or what, but this is Werner von Braun who gave the world, the V2 and so much amazing technology. You have to look and go, okay, he said that, that's interesting. And there's, I mean, the concept that we're not alone in the universe, in parentheses, I know that, that. I think most people know that. It would be the biggest surprise is if we weren't. it would feel terrible. It'd feel very lonely, wouldn't it? Just us drifting around the rock. And I've seen stuff, and my mum definitely did, and um, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of people have seen stuff, and even to the point, I can't remember. My brother would hate me for this. It's a sort of a triangular ship with like sort of three, I don't know, let's call them engines or what have you, underneath. And you can Google this. Anyone can Google this. And my brother had one over his garden. And he said, this is not alien. This is absolutely a terrestrial ship that we don't know about. And it was literally just hovering around over his garden and then went off. And I can't for the life of me remember the name, but it's definitely it's ours, but it ain't our tech. So there's something there. Even I will say, as a military historian, Werner von Braun, one of my top military scientists, of course, like everything comes back to military. You've got people like basically him, Jean-Emile Stauff, and I can't remember his name now. I'd kick myself. The Supergun man, the Canadian guy. So there's a something. I'm not saying what it is because I don't know, but the layman is right to ask. The only difference is I couldn't ask in my capacity, but you're bravely just going on and saying, "Fuck it, let's talk about this." Which is fascinating. Me as a historian, I love this. So where are we going? Do you think?
Okay, well, let me just go back to Mike Bara there. His books are, by the way, really good. And there was one book I was reading the other day about General Patton at the end of the Second World War. He could have went to Berlin and he could have got there way before the Russians, and he was ordered not to go to Berlin. And the main story there is that the Allies had made a deal with Stalin that the Russians could take Berlin in revenge for the Germans almost taking Moscow and all that. And fair enough, human beings are fucking petty, so that's perfectly believable. But there's an alternative theory that Patton was ordered to pivot south down towards kind of like the Czech areas, I think it was, kind of like Czechoslovakia as it was, and there was like a big research lab there, and the Nazis had developed the Bell, which was an anti-gravitation device, and it had like runes around it, and this was reckoned to be like a super weapon that the Nazis had developed. And Patton was actually ordered to go south to capture that instead of Berlin, because it wasn't just because they made a deal with Stalin that he could get his little petty triumph and take Berlin, but actually they were far more interested. They were like, just let that fucking Bolshevik son of a bitch have fucking Berlin. Who cares? They didn't even care about Berlin. The Allied command, the Western Allies, they didn't fucking care about it. That wasn't even a priority. They were interested in the Bell. That's what they were really after.
What I mean, this
into all this
because my dad, who was I only lost very, very recently. My dad was. I mean, I grew up with the World at War. The World at War was literally, I thought it was like the only TV channel. That and Das Boot were on, that was it. And my dad, as the years went on, always had the top tech, the TV filled the room. It was huge. But he would sit there watching like black and white war documentaries. World War II was just it. But the one thing he loved, and he had books on this as well, was all the crazy ass Nazi wonder weapons, and of course you come down to the Bell, which looks like a.
Well, it just looks like a bell.
Yeah, well, it does, but it looks like your classical sort of 1930s to 50s UFO that they would put out there. It looks like a bell-shaped thing, and a lot of people said that this was faster than light travel. A lot of people said that it was looking into time travel, artificial wormhole technology. So I'm not going to say what it is, but the Nazis were huge on this. I mean, this was was what you're doing was a lot of their thing. They they're archaeologists, and the Nazis were, love them or hate them, but they were very forward thinking in this. I think sort of Indiana Jones takes that concept massively on. They were looking for biblical ancient wonder weapons, be it the the true spear that was put into Christ's side, or be it the ancient mythological world of, it looks like Thule, it's Thule, that takes you to wherever, and anything, any ancient device or anything, any ancient secret that would give them this incredible advantage. Now, a lot of this, of course, is occultism, but when you're talking about the people who started the biggest war on the planet, aren't just interested in winning the war, but they're also going, oh, let's look at this. And this is before they got desperate. This is before they started losing. And then you've got people like Werner von Braun, who were talking about this. You do have to look and go, okay, what? what was it? Can I be in on that conversation, please? I get that. These are top people, the names who will be remembered long after we're forgotten, who have said and done these things.
Well, let me just make a point there. I've always kind of wondered why the Nazis just gave up on atomic bombs. They just gave up on it, basically. Their heavy water experiments in Norway. I mean, the British commandos, did a lot of damage there, but it didn't really seem like the Germans were particularly interested in it in the first place because they were working on this. I mean, atomic weaponry is like nothing next to anti-gravitational technology that's going to take them off world. So they just shifted their priorities. And I think they realized that the anti-grav stuff was far more important than atomic weapons. They're just like, who cares about that crap? That's primitive stuff, And you also have to wonder towards the end of the war, 42, 43. Remember, Adolf Hitler, right, was thought of as an obscure corporal from the First World War by the Nazi high command. So how much did Hitler actually know? Probably not a lot, to be honest. In his deteriorating mental state, 43, 44, 45, probably a lot of these SS colonels and Wehrmacht generals and all this were hoarding this information, realized, seeing the writing on the wall, better just keep this to ourselves as a bargaining chip so we can get our asses away from the fucking Russians at the end of the war. Save your own ass territory.
I mean, the hunting Hitler, but the hunting Hitler documentary. I remember talking to Professor Tony Pollard about this, and he said, "Oh, they asked me, I wouldn't be involved in that shit." He said. But actually, do you know what? The guys there, I'm going to be honest, they've come up with a definitive proof that Hitler died in Berlin. DNA proof. You have to believe someone on that point because otherwise you don't. And it's that. Oh, they're an expert. They believe. Is there a... Can you reopen that? Is there an option to say, well, did Hitler die in the bunker in Berlin, as everyone said, or did he escape to, let's say, Argentina? The guys doing Hunting Hitler thought so. They got a massive TV series and deal out of it. It still could have happened. I'm not holding, the people in charge of saying, oh, well, this is DNA proof. Is it? You just told me it is. I don't need to accept what you've said. It's interesting to think it might have happened. I'm not saying it's A, B, or C. I'm just saying it might have happened. What is fascinating, though, is, okay, let's say that the research is correct. Hitler died in Berlin in the bunker, as they say. Fine. But look at the stuff they found there. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on, and there was a lot of stuff, even as far as Antarctica. They were pushing boundaries, much as, much or more than anyone can. And I mean, that's absolutely fine, but not since the Crusades have people been so into this kind of stuff. And yet these are the Nazis. These are, they are brilliant with their technology, with their innovation, with everything else. It was, and I'm not glorifying them, as you know, but if this was the entire human race, we'd have hit the peak of whatever anyone could do. They were fearlessly trying everything. It was almost like the Scottish Enlightenment happening again. They were trying everything. Not everything worked, but they were fearless and they were very intelligent. And so I know that we learned a lot more out of World War II than we say we know now. And we've applied that. Most of the technology, be it cars, aircraft, you name it, came from World War II. Without wars, we don't advance. So my dad taught me that long before I was a historian. I was still in school, and it's very, very true. So I mean, there's a lot to look into here, and certainly you think that there's something on Mars, mainly because someone's covering it up.
Well, they're unquestionably covering it up, Ricky. I mean, it's overwhelmingly obvious that they're covering it up. You know, Hoagland and Hancock had just put the lights on it, but you know, it's really, really obvious that NASA's own actions are telling you they're covering it up, and blatantly, they're so sloppy. They're so sloppy at covering it up. Anyone could figure it out in 2 seconds flat. But how much of it ties in to what Mike Bara is saying to do with General Patton being diverted towards the Nazi bell? You know, how much
No.
is to do with the formation of NASA in 1958 and who was in charge of NASA and who was behind the foundation of NASA and what were their goals? And then you read the Brookings report, then you read the McDaniel report, which basically backs up Hoagland and all his researchers and says, you know, that these guys have been following the advice of the Brookings report to not report things to the public and to hoard all the information to themselves. And it has to all do with Cydonia. Cydonia connects to Giza. And again, this is where I kind of get frustrated with Hancock. He's saying, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Maybe there's a connection between Giza and Cydonia. I don't know. And yet he writes with such a passion and such a belief about the Sphinx being tied to the age of Leo, you know, and all this, and the whole torrid meteor stream, everything that he talks about that will all be in the presentations that will bring out, you know, it's like, who are you trying to kid here, Hancock? You obviously believe in this, and it's obvious that you're not only a true believer, but a fanatic, and yet you're still trying to put in the mealy-mouthed modals, as I like to call it, maybes and shoulds and maybe perhaps is. Come on, fucking, you know,
He's just trying not
Graham,
to commit.
Graham, who you find trying to fucking kid here? You obviously believe in this. You know, it ties into the whole Ben stone and all this. See, Hancock falls short of Beaumont in connecting the dots in terms of the comets and the meteorites and asteroids fueling the planet. He never got that far with it. But fucking Beaumont was saying this in 1925. He was saying this in 1932. He was saying this 100 years ago.
Yeah.
A century ago, and the rest of the world still hasn't fucking caught up with them.
Well, I mean, I was reading something from the New York Times of 1908, as memory serves, and they were giving this the whole Mars mystery, shall I say? They were giving this proper news, proper coverage. Whereas now people go like, oh, yeah, cuckoo, you know, yeah, crazy. I mean, so this was, you know, and the New York Times back then was one of the most serious newspapers in the world. I know a lot of people have said it's muted now. I mean, like when I do Falklands War work, the MYT is where I go to. But so let's say Mars is a thing, or someone thinks it is.
Yeah.
Does this tie to Hollow Earth, which we haven't touched, to Atlantis, which we've covered Atlantis. I believe that there is a something. Too many people have believed in it not to be. Most written about subjects in the world. There's certainly a lot of stuff underwater, is all I'm going to say. Mars, I can see, there might be a something. And a lot of people have spoken about the moon and what could be on the other side. And, you know, and you know, Buzz Aldrin famously punched someone in the face who said that it was fake. I don't believe the moon landings were fake. I think they were genuine.
Me too.
Hollow Earth. That's the theory that, to me, pushes that boundary of reality, you know. And I say this, I remember Journey to the Center of the Earth, the original film. I think The Rock has done a remake amongst other people, but the original film is very well.
The Rock's and everything.
Huh?
The Rock's and everything.
Yeah, he has, to be fair. But the original one, you know, it's set in Edinburgh, of course. It's set in Edinburgh in the 1800s. It's the sort of tail end of the Scottish Enlightenment. Where else but Edinburgh? We're here in Edinburgh. We're looking down into the earth, which is wonderful. And, you know, I like to think of it as that. But Hollow Earth, hit me. You know, hit me. What?
Well, it's quite simple.
Hollow Earth being a theory.
All right. I really need to kind of unpack this, so this might take a while. The idea, and it does kind of go a little bit into tinfoil hat territory, I do admit. The idea is that the people who lived on Mars were technologically advanced and they saw the writing on the wall. They knew it was going to happen because they were a spacefaring race. and they saw that their planet was in real danger, especially after the fall of man, according to Luke Baldwin, which was the water planet between Mars and Jupiter. Once that blew up, then the people of Mars knew that they were doomed. They were on the clock. They had to get the fuck off of Mars. Again, this is, like I said, tinfoil hat territory, and it's maybe stretching credulity a little bit, but like I say, you have to connect all the different sources. And some of them are a wee bit out there, you know?
That's one of the great things. You're like Satan. You don't judge anyone. You read everything, don't you? You know.
Well, thanks for comparing me to Satan with this red backline here. But anyway.
Start, isn't it? But go on. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know what you're trying to say. So anyway, I'm devilishly handsome after all, you know. But anyway, so the Martians, whoever was on Mars, they could see the writing on the wall that we're fucked here. We need to get the fuck off of Mars. So, you know, they started moving to Earth and started colonizing, setting up colonies on Earth, because they realized also that Earth was the nearest Mars-like planet. It's strange to hear it from the other way, because we often think of Mars as being the most Earth-like planet. Well, the Martians probably looked at Earth and thought the same thing. We could set up colonies there. It's a relatively primitive planet. They don't really have advanced civilizations like ours, so we could set up shop there, you know, because our planet is probably doomed. And then Hancock talks about there was a fragment of this giant comet. I was actually editing this earlier on today, and it exploded above the northern hemisphere of Mars and destroyed the whole planet, wiped it out, destroyed the Northern Ocean. Like I say, oceans are very important when you're talking about planets. They're the most important thing. Always look to the oceans. They're the key to everything. So I'm actually going somewhere with this. So when the Martians moved to Earth and set up their colonies here, they realized that what destroyed their planet might destroy this one as well. So they need to get underground. And particularly, they need to get beneath the oceans, because of what happened to their northern ocean. It was blown off the planet, so they need to get underneath the oceans to make sure that if the same thing happens on Earth, they've got coverage for that. And Earth is much bigger; it's twice the size of Mars, at least. It's probably more than that, actually. So this is where the Hollow Earth comes from: the tunnels built by the Martians to get away from potential disasters hitting the Earth. And the Earth has been hit many times since the fall of Mars, you know, by comets, asteroids of various sizes, according to Hancock. Again, that's all in the presentation. It's not just me saying it. I'll present all of this because I'm working on it right now. But Earth has been hit many, many times by, let's just say, interstellar bodies, be they meteors or asteroids more often than not, sometimes comets. But when Mars was hit, it was absolutely destroyed. But the survivors of Mars, when they came here, they had to resort to Hollow Earth in order to survive, because they realized that Earth was going to get pummeled as well.
Sorry, I was going to say, so there's evidence of Mars being hit. I mean, obviously, you know, it's near the asteroid belt, it will get hit, but you're saying there's evidence that Mars has had a catastrophic wham. Something big has whacked it. Is that
well,
correct?
Actually, I had three. The only question is whether it was at the same time. There was the Insidus, the Argyre, and the Hellas craters, and they were responsible for creating the big scar across Mars, the Valles Marineris, and the big volcano Olympus Mons, and the three subsequent volcanoes, which are right beside it. So it was those craters that created the big scar and the big volcano.
Gotcha.
According to Hancock, and I believe him.
Sounds fun. I remember again, you know, and you know, I bring it back to my dad, weirdly enough, and he came up with this rock, and I can't remember where it's from, and to remember, you know, my dad did know everyone in every field ever, and he came up with this giant, great big sort of red rock, which formed part of his rockery, and knew a guy who was a geologist, had done some other things. He took samples, and this is a piece of Mars, and my dad, and he destroyed how many drill bits going through this chunk of Mars. Why was he going through it? Because it had a nice hole, this big round rock. It becomes the sort of thing of his rockery, where the water comes down and sprays out a bit of Mars in a garden in Finchley. And it's incredible, you know. I did sit there and think, you know, you would love this feature. You know, I've held it. It's there. It's still in his garden. Obviously he's passed, but he owned the house, and it's still there. And you know, my brother goes there occasionally, and we got a big ass chunk of Mars in my dad's garden, which is just stupid, isn't it? But going through it, that's when he started asking this friend who knew about geology, who asked someone else. He's like, this bloody thing it's just destroying the bits I'm putting through it. And he said, hang on. He said, let me take a wee chip in. And yeah, part of Mars, in my dad's garden. So it proves there was, Mars right next to the asteroid belt would have got hit a lot. But you're saying 3 big cataclysmic.
Yeah, these were huge fucking asteroids. These things were massive, bigger than anything that's ever hit Earth, apparently, or certainly up there. And there was 3 of them: Hellas, Argyre, and Isidis. Yeah, they just devastated it. Boom, just destroyed it. But go ahead.
So coming back to formed questions, and again to your audience, I apologize because I had a whole series of questions lined up and I've lost them because Blair and I have been chasing each other around a wee bit. So it's probably a penultimate question here. What is there to find? Now, I find, and again, this is my method. I'm not saying this is, anyone else's method. Everyone finds their own way to it. I find that sometimes when I'm looking at something, you can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes you take a step back and I look at what's not there, and I use what I call the black hole analogy. You can't see a black hole. No one's ever seen a black hole, because you can't see it, because it sucks light in, it freezes light in time. But what you see is how everything behaves around it. And that kind of gives you an idea of what's there. And that's how we know black holes exist. That goes back to Patrick Moore on the Sky at Night, which I grew up with. And sometimes the behavior of objects around blank tell you what might be there. So tell me, stroke audience, let's imagine, space travel and time is something we can control. As in, if you were there, if you were in charge of it, if you could go anywhere, do anything, where are the answers? Or whether or not you like the answers. But they say if you want to be right, prepare to be wrong, which you always have been, as I've known you. Yeah. Where are the answers? We spoke about the big questions, which are huge, which are mind-blowing. But coming to the answer is always rather simple sometimes. Where are the answers? What is the Rosetta Stone that unlocks all of this in one? Where would you be looking?
Well, it's interesting you use that phrase Rosetta Stone, because that's exactly the phrase that was used by Graham Hancock.
Really?
In the Mars Mystery. Yep. They use exactly that term. Cydonia. Unquestionably Cydonia and Elysium. I would say also Elysium as well. Don't underestimate Elysium. But everyone seems to focus on Cydonia exclusively. But wherever there's pyramids, that's where you look, because that is going to prove the connection with Egypt and with other pyramids around the world. Don't underestimate, by the way, how many pyramids there are on this planet. Never mind that one. There's loads. There's the Bosnian pyramid. Oh yeah, there's pyramids all over the planet. There's pyramids in Scotland. People don't know about. There's the Salisbury Hill. There's Hancock. He came up with the theory. I was reading it because I was editing the presentation, that Stonehenge was created as an early warning system in case another huge asteroid would hit the planet. That's why they created stone circles like Stonehenge, according to Hancock. And it's an interesting theory. What is Stonehenge? An early warning.
Yeah.
They could trace the asteroids and the meteorites in the torrid meteor stream using the laboratory at Stonehenge. This was a theory that Hancock came up with, and that was.
It doesn't. It makes perfect sense. If you were trying to do a thing, I know you got his rock and whatever the hell shape the rocks and put the rocks there. Nobody knows to this day, but it does make sense that it's a rudimentary, like a sundial, but a meteor stroke asteroid dial.
Now, another thing as well with the face at Cydonia, why it's so pivotal and so important, and I'm going to have to go back to Beaumont here to really.
Yeah.
Sorry?
to the Martian face in the rock, which looks a bit like mine in the shadow here.
Well, yeah. Well, it's not just a human face. It's actually half and half, and I forget who says it. It might have been Hancock, but in fact, I think it actually was Hancock. That actually the face at Sidonia is half human and it's half cat. So it's like a feline feature, cat, like yeah, because it's talking about the age of Leo, kind of thing. The age of Leo, the age of the cat. Now, Beaumont, when he's talking about Atlantis and the likes of Britain, the Key to World History and the Great Deception, again, this is tinfoil hat, kind of getting close to territory. He talks about the Northern Europeans, what he calls the Phoenicians, what Brian Desborough and David Icke call the Phoenicians. In other words, the red people are the people from Mars, because Phoenicians were from Mars, according to Desborough, according to Icke, who's completely run with that theory. You know, the colonizers from Mars, but the Phoenicians, you know, they, according to Beaumont, were known as the people of Gad, or the Catai, or the Catioaria, also meaning Aryans. You know, so the whole Phoenician thing, the Areo-Phoenicians is as Beaumont refers to them. So, you know, so maybe that is a clue, putting it together, joining the dots, where Hancock has said, I think it was Hancock, I'm not 100% on that, by the way, I'm pretty sure it was him, that actually the face on Mars is half human, half feline. So it's like, and it's also meant to connect to the Great Sphinx. So it's like a Sphinx on Mars, and the Sphinx is a lion at the age of Leo. So it's the people whose symbol is the cat. And look at a lot of the Northern European chivalry. You've got lions on the flag. You've got lions on England. You've got lions on Holland. You've got lions on Scotland. The people of the cat.
The lion rampant,
lion rampant, exactly.
Of automatically, and you know, if you don't know this is going to bake your noodle, of course. The Egyptians massively, because the Sphinx, they worship cats. The Egyptian cat goddess Bastet was, you know, a massive deal. Bastet was, and even, you know, the Roman goddess of the hunt was Diana, but I think Bastet, it's one of the most important Egyptian things that they talk about is, you know, with the cat. And so that, again, even if you didn't know that, or no one else wrote that, I happen to know that for a fact. I suppose that's interesting, isn't it? Because you then look at the Egyptians, and you're saying Egyptians, Mars, there's a thing, and then someone who doesn't, which is me, doesn't know all about this stuff is going, well, there's that, you know, which I don't expect the layman to know about the you know, the Roman goddess of the hunt or the Egyptian goddess Bastet, but I of course I do. That's what historians do, I suppose. But then it becomes more interesting, doesn't it? You throw that in. Where does and I promised the last question is the penultimate, but I have another question because we didn't touch this. Where does World War Zero come in now? But for those who
massively comes into it.
If I could just introduce this, so Blair had spoken to me, and we swap ideas, and you know, historians, we like to know we're not insane. You know, we like to go, look, I'm going down a rabbit hole, and we check in with other historians. And sometimes it's best not to check in with a historian who does what you do. And we do check in, and we've had, you know, laughing conversations about being locked in a rubber room with with a straitjacket. Every historian does this, you know. There's a reason historians all turn to alcohol, and it is all of them, by the way. But I remember, Glenn, when you were saying about, there's this, there's that, there's someone I'm missing, and I said, have you heard of World War Zero, which we covered earlier. And then you came out with this book, didn't you? I think it was by what's his name? I can't remember who wrote the World War Zero book. I mean,
Steve Preston. I remember you being singularly unimpressed, looking at this like, what is this crap?
But I mean, I'd looked at it, and I'd been interested in it as a military historian, and I know, wasn't it something like 90% of the male population of the Earth, was it 90%, was wiped out in an event which is archaeologically proven but historically unknown. And
I thought it was
I remember
90%
I
of them.
said this to you and said it could be something, it could be nothing. Do you want to look at this? And then you just it took off, didn't it? Tell
Yeah.
us about that, because as a military historian, I'm fascinated by the idea that there's a world war we knew nothing about.
Yeah.
Hit us with that.
Well, first of all, before I answer that question, have I answered your question so far?
I hope so. I think so. Yeah. I can't think of anything
Yeah.
that hasn't been answered or hasn't been
Yeah.
covered. And like I said, this is one of the great things. You're not saying I know. You're not being
No, I
an
don't.
evangelist like Icke.
Yeah.
You're not saying you must believe this. All
No.
you're saying is, look, let's look at this question. This guy wrote this guy wrote that. And if you call them conspiracy theorists, that's fine, because do you know what? If you take those guys out of it, there's not a lot of source material. This is
Well, what I
like
meant
right.
is, are you satisfied with the answers I've given you?
I'm very satisfied thus far, and I hope. One second, sorry. I hope anyone
Sorry.
listening to this would also be satisfied, because you're not saying you know. You're saying that there is
Instead
a
of trying to figure
question.
it out. Yeah.
Yeah, let's answer the question. And I love this, because you're a no bullshit kind of historian who has got into a very bullshit area, and
Mm.
you're saying don't bullshit me. Let's find out. Come on, some of these are the
Well,
most written about subjects on the planet. The
yeah.
biggest question ever asked: where did we come from?
Well,
Hit me with it, which I like this.
yeah.
Sometimes as a
Oh, yeah.
when you got to jump in with both feet and see where the ripples go. Sometimes you just got to hit it with your head and say fuck it. So I like this, and it's very very different from what I do and what most historians do. And I like this because you're not an evangelist for you must believe A, B, C. You're just saying that
No.
there is this. Let's look at this. If this is bullshit, let's all look at this together, which is brilliant. I like that. That's how historians should be. Historians got too comfortable. We've spoken about this, but I call
Yeah.
it says here history.
Yeah.
Historians got lazy. They quoted other guys. So, don't blame me if it's wrong. It's that guy over there.
Mm.
Whereas I've never done that. I know you've never done that. And we'll stand there and go, oh, fuck it, here's a question. Let's look at it. Let's ask it. Fuck it. What could happen? And off screen, we've had endless conversations about this. The people said, no, we
Oh, yeah.
didn't know the answer, so we didn't ask the question. And we've been like, but that's what our job is. That's what historians do. So let's come back to World War Z. Yes, you've answered all the questions so far. Where
Good.
does World War Zero come into this? This is a big thing. It's a massive thing. I was so happy you hadn't heard of it, because I got to feel like I was really impressive about this. Archaeologists are looking at it. It's massive studies, top universities, you name it. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Average doesn't know about it because nobody has any or many answers. A lot of it comes into Northern Europe, which technically does come into Coleman's
It
boat.
wasn't just that. It
Spirit.
wasn't just Northern Europe. It was global. This was a global war.
It was 90% of the male population of the world was wiped out in I don't know what, but a short period. So hit me with World War Zero. What do we need to know? What are we looking for here? How does it tie in?
Well, first of all, you need to know that that's one of the few sources that talks about what happened to Venus. And by the way, Steve Preston makes an excellent case that Venus was referenced in the Old Testament and the Bible, though it was known by another name. It was known as Rahab. I think that was an old Hebrew term. It meant like vain one or like beautiful one, because Venus was like more beautiful than the Earth, and then it was hit by some catastrophe. And I think a lot of what Steve Preston also says ties in with Lou Baldwin, but that's a lot of that's trying to untangle the SNES cables territory. This is really trying to untie Gordian's knot.
Right.
But first of all, he talks about Venus. Nobody else talks about Venus in that way, at least not that I've seen. If anyone,
Venus that even exists, isn't there? No one's even looked at Venus
except for Steve Preston. And
No.
World War Zero really looks into that. It looks at the global catastrophe which struck the whole planet. Another good author who talks about that is Charles Koss. He talks about the war between the giants and the gods, the war between the Nephilim and the Anunnaki, So Charles Coss also, Rita Jean Moran talks about that, the war of the giants versus the gods. Beaumont talks about it. This was a global war. It was a global nuclear war which destroyed a third of the population. The whole thing about the 90% of males dying out, that sounds like something that Michael Tazarian said, maybe something I told you, that he said in his research that the 90% of the males of the planet were destroyed. That sounds more like Tazarian territory, though maybe Steve Preston wrote it as well. Maybe that's where Tazarian got it from. Who knows? But, World War Z, it talks about this global, catastrophic war which happened deep in the past, following a great catastrophe, and when resources were scarce, so the surviving nations, built themselves up and then went to war and fucked themselves over again, if I'm remembering correctly, or it was kind of along those lines. So World War Z was very important. I remember actually I was sitting the other day at the place that we work, which I won't mention, but I was just sitting there and I was actually reading it, just sitting there reading the book. And one of our colleagues was like trying to make fun of it, like, "Oh, what's that rubbish? Oh, you're reading this shit again and all this." And I didn't respond. I just said no, and I just kept reading it. It was like 2 minutes later, can I have a look at that? So there is an interest in this if you just hold firm and don't respond when people are mocking you and all this sort of thing. Like, "Oh, that's all the shit." And you're just like, right, okay. I just think, well, I find it interesting. I'm just can I have a look? There is an audience for it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating subject. It's something that happened. I mean, for me as a military historian, history begins 1469 BC, the Battle of Megiddo, the first recorded battle in history, and the kind of Holy Grail, although it's been covered, and again it was denied. It was a story. It isn't even a story. It's a blind guy wrote a poem that became a book that became the Trojan War, and a lot of people said the Trojan War never happened. No, they found Troy.
No, it did happen. It absolutely happened.
Of course it is. Yeah. Well, one of the stupid things is Alexander the Great knew that the Trojan War happened. He went to Troy. He found Troy. Why people go, "Oh no, it's just a myth"? Alexander the Great found it. He took, other people, and then they came up 100 years ago. Oh, look, there's Troy, exactly where everyone said Troy was. It's open to interpretation what happened strategically or tactically in the Trojan War, but the Trojan War happened. I mean, to me, it's fantastic. If there was more on the Trojan War, I'd be a Trojan War historian, not a Falklands War historian. But
well, you did promise a sequel to that book about Hannibal, so we're still waiting on that.
I did, yes. And I mean, of course, that's a wonderful idea that I wanted to take it from Hannibal starting out, which no one covers that. They're like, there was a start, here's the Hannibal story, and there's his little end. And I want to cover those two in big sort of macro and micro. And it's just, it was time, it was money, it was a lot of people going, "We like your Hannibal stuff, but can we please get some more Falklands?" Perhaps if more people buy more Falklands books, I can afford the time to finish off Hannibal. But let's go with this. So the penultimate question, World War Zero, we don't know a lot. The top people don't know a lot, but we all know it happened. Do you think there's more to come out of that?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something as well. This is where, again, you have to join the dots. I know I'm parroting that phrase, and, David Icke first said it, so all to him. But he's right. You do have to. Now, we have to tie the dots there with what Steve Preston is saying and what Richard Hoagland is saying and Mike Bara is saying in Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA, because Hoagland, and it talks about this extensively in his interviews with Art Bell, I wish Hoagland had written books, by the way. Mike Barr is a good author, but I wish Hoagland had written more books. But as it happens, we've got his interviews with Art Bell, so we still have something. But what he talks about is, and this all ties in with JFK, the reason why they were so set on going to the moon and not sharing the technology with the Soviet Union was because there was residue of weapons and technology on the moon that NASA wanted to get its hands on. And apparently that's the reason why we've not went back since the 1960s, the 1970s, whatever the last time was that we were on the moon. So that's the reason why NASA stops going to the moon, because they got what they wanted. They got the technology, they got the residue of the technology, and they've been studying it and back engineering it ever since, according to Hoagland. So you wonder, where does this tie in with World War Zero? Okay, well, according to the World War Zero theory, we had colonies on the moon and on Mars back then.
Right.
So that is something that Steve Preston has been pressing, in his books, that there were colonies on Mars and the Moon that were probably our colonies from advanced civilizations that we had back then. And the real question that no one's asking about Mars, by the way, is Mars terrestrial or is it lunar? Because it seems to be somewhere in between. Everyone seems to assume that Mars was terrestrial, but was it possibly actually a moon? Was it a lunar surface rather than a terrestrial one like Earth? Because it's halfway between.
It kind of is. And I mean, it's got two. I think it's got an extra, but two main moons, Phobos and Deimos, which just lumps of rock which just tumble around.
Fear and terror.
Very, very quickly, may I just take a break before I come back to my final question?
Okay, sure.
Can we hit the pause?
Yeah, I need to go to the bathroom as well, actually.
Yeah, that's the one. Yes. Right, old men in their 40s. Back in 1 second.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome back. Yeah, this is what you get interviewing in your 40s. You see, you need a gentleman's break. But I suppose you answered, or if not, it must be most of the questions out there. So you're looking at Mars, Atlantis, Hollow Earth. So many people have written about this. You're saying, what is out there? Let's let's tackle the questions. And I think you're doing a really good job. And I think this is, something that I hope if the people who follow me, hopefully they take me seriously. That this is a reason they should take you seriously. You're not an evangelist. You're not saying the royal family are lizards, like Icke is saying. You're not saying it. You're just asking the big questions that people have sort of put to one side. We know the Earth isn't flat. We've covered that one. But people get into this. People believe this. People are right to ask questions. I think it was a massive thing when recently, after years and years and years of saying, we're alone in the universe, that they turned around and there was a big thing in the US Congress where they said, look, there is alien life. And guess what? No one panicked. Everyone said, yeah, we know. The result to that, not everyone saw it, but everyone watched it. And the guy wouldn't be there for no reason. I think there was a lot of pressure to do that. I think, it's one of the things I believe, I'm not going to say it's true, that Trump has said that if he gets in, this is sort of his gambit to get in. If you elect me, I'll tell you all the truth about aliens and everything we know. Interesting that someone takes a shot at him a couple of weeks later, however bad.
That was a terrible shot.
Yeah, well, it was close, but of course, if they hit him between the eyes, I don't think they'd have hit much. But that's a different train of thought. We're not.
Before we go any further, by the way, I'm pro-Trump and Ricky very much isn't. So there you go.
It's not his policies. Not being funny. Politics, like UK, there's just no front runners. There's no one good, and America has that at the moment.
To my mind,
Trump for me is comedy value. That's the only value he has.
Trump represents something different to me than what he represents to most people. Trump represents some of the old blood. To me, he's like the last Phoenician king. That's how I kind of look at him, with the blonde hair, and he's 6'3", blue eyes. He's like the last king of Phoenicia. He's like the last king of Mars.
He's to me.
There's a good book title right there. The Last King of Mars.
No, don't tell him that. He'll have a second face built with himself. I'm just going to say I don't like the man. I think he's just rude and brash and ignorant. And here in Scotland, he never went down well.
No, he didn't. No, a lot of people don't like him in Scotland. I'll tell you that. A lot of people do not. He might be the most unpopular politician since Lord Dundas. That says something.
I mean, I think the most important thing is, no one came to everyone what to do and how he had money. And of course, that is the ultimate way to upset everyone in Scotland. We've had that for centuries. He didn't know what he was biting off. And I think it was rude. And I think it was rude to the Queen. But that's another
Trump
issue.
was rude to the Queen. Have you heard what he said about the Queen?
No.
Well, watch the interview he did with Nigel Farage. where he's talking about the Queen. I think she's great. I agree with her on everything, except the only thing I disagree is that she should have cut off Prince Harry when he snubbed the royal family. No, Trump's always spoken very highly of the Queen.
But he did also just walk straight out in front of her and sort of got that look like, I give up, you know.
Did he? When did he do that? I didn't see that.
He talks
about the, are you talking about the NATO leaders when he shoved that guy to one side and just went, us?
No, it was when he came to the UK. You know, she's a 90-something-year-old woman. She's the queen in her own country. And he just walks in front of her and just stops with this pie-eyed, happy idiot fool on the hill look about him.
Did he? I never saw that.
No, as I'm saying, like I'm not into politics or policies. I don't think America has got a great choice. I don't think the UK has had a great choice. There's no big natural leaders there, and I think that is continuing to be the case. But we'll move on.
Well, if he did barge in front of the Queen, he shouldn't have done that, I'll tell you. If that's true. I never saw it. But if he did do that, then it wouldn't exactly be the first time he's barged in front of a world leader, let's face it.
No, the politics divides, it doesn't unite. Yeah. So if we come down to perhaps a final question.
Well, let me just also say one thing. Let me just say also, most of the folk that I talk to in real life are very against Trump. I'm personally in favor of him, but I get along with people who despise Trump. I'll go along with everybody.
He's Marmite, you know, and you do. I mean, so I suppose as a final question, I mean, I want to know when your book's coming out. That's what I want to know because I'm a book fan. That's probably not the last question, actually, but is a book planned? Are you working on this? Is this taking shape? You've done more research than probably most people over a sustained period, because that's what you do. Is there a book? Is there something in the works? Is it in your mind? Is it?
No, I don't have an immediate plan to write a book about this because I'm still learning it. I don't feel like I can write a book until I know the subject a lot more thoroughly than I do know it, because there's different theories as well about what destroyed Mars. Hancock's theory is only one, that there was a massive comet or asteroid that exploded over the northern hemisphere. There's another theory that it was destroyed in a nuclear war, according to John Brandenburg, and he backs this up with finding xenon-129, which is a radiation that's found in nuclear environments. It's been found here on Earth in areas that suffered nuclear catastrophes in the past. And there's also the theory that Mars lost at least one of its moons, or maybe all of the above are true. I mean, Mars has been so decimated and so hammered, and as I've told you innumerable times, it's a bad idea to colonize Mars. Do not colonize Mars. You have to look beyond Mars. You have to look to Titan or Europa. If you're talking about colonies, I would not suggest colonizing Mars. It's a terrible idea because Mars is vulnerable, and it also represents a part of humanity's past that needs to be moved past rather than indulged in. But that's kind of subject for another time. Forget about Mars. Mars is a lost cause in terms of colonies. You do need to study Cydonia in terms of rock samples. You need to put people on the ground there. Hopefully we get to do so through SpaceX, through Elon Musk, because we're not fucking going to do it through NASA. That's for goddamn sure. So hopefully Elon gets on board, gets on side, and we can go to Cydonia through him, through SpaceX. But no, I don't have a book planned because I'm still kind of learning it myself, and I'm trying to put it all together with the Mars mystery and put it all together with other sources like the mysterious comet, which I've not even started on, by the way. So I've got to go through all that. Sorry?
There's a lot coming at least, so people need to follow this and see where you're going with it. And when people find you, imagine you're one of my followers. You go, okay, let's follow this guy. Let's see where he's going with this.
Well, I've not even touched on Hollow Earth yet with Missing Can-Am project and all. Oh, there's so many things. There's so many different pieces of this tapestry that I haven't even touched yet.
Going unturned here.
Oh, I'm going to go through all of it in the years to come. It's going to take me years. I would say I'm not even going to write a book till I'm at least 45.
And you're 40 nearly, aren't you? You're 40 in November.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, no, I mean, I look forward to it because also I know you're writing as well. And again, for those who don't know Blair, I mean, he's got other books on other historical subjects coming up, and I've read them, and the writing is superb. By the way, the writing is, as a 9-time best-selling author, he writes well. Blair writes really, really well, and you totally get into there. And I'm not a blow sunshine up your ass type. If your writing is awful, I'll tell you. But I'd help someone correct it. But no, I really like Blair's writing, the way he puts things, and better than me. I think so. I'm really looking forward to what you come up with, because I know you don't do the bullshit. You don't
No.
swallow the first excuse that's given to you. You say, but there's this.
Mhm.
And I've done this. A lot of people, I don't want to put the focus on myself here, but like the Falklands invasion. It was done, it was done, it was done. Everyone knew what happened. We've seen the film Ungentlemanly Act. We've read, as it's mentioned in a couple of books, not a lot happened. And then it's become the biggest selling book on the Falklands War literally ever, The First Casualty. And it was finally accepted, and people realized what we'd done. And it was, it's very rare in a historian's life you get to change history, and I did, which is an amazing thing. It's a very humbling experience, and now people know about it, which is fantastic. People have been working on your question for 4,000-5,000 years, maybe more. I don't know. No one has ever provided a definitive answer. And a
Yeah.
lot of historians have avoided the subject because this is the tinfoil hat. This is if I say hollow Earth, people are going to just hear flat Earth. If I say aliens, they're going to go, oh God, nutcase. If I say Mars, they're going to talk about little green men. Which is funny because obviously military history moves with that. We talk about like the Foo Fighters of World War II. I got a wonderful report from the Falklands War about reports of increased alien activity during the war, and this guy, obviously it's on the 14th of June, we just won the war, and he's obviously flush with success because he ends it with presumably these were little green men in ponchos, these being the Argentine soldiers. But there is so much about it, even after the Falklands War. We go into and again, I mean, I know a guy who loves this. It's just, I said to him, look, there's this thing. I'm not saying it's a thing. The black goo. Billy, if you're watching, Billy, if you're watching, we're doing the black goo on Southern Thule or Southern Thule, it looks like. Again, it's something, do you know what? It's interesting. I laugh along with it. There are things that happened that a lot of people have put together. I'm not going down that particular rabbit hole. My friends who were there and liberated the South Sandwich Islands over sort of 20th and 21st of June will tell you that all they found were several hundred tins of corned beef, and they were eating corned beef for years afterwards. But there's things. People are saying, look, there's this sentient black goo, and if you don't dig on this, Google it. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying it's interesting.
Sorry, the other thing as well is don't just look at the surface of planets. You have to look beneath them. Talk about hollow Earth. This is valid a subject as hollow Mars because according to like Lou Baldwin and others that I've read, there's possibly life beneath Mars. People are worried about life on the surface of Mars. No, you need to start thinking about what's below Mars. That's what you should be really thinking about, worried about. And it's not just Mars as well. You got the hollow Earth, you got the hollow Mars, and it ties into the whole Phoenician thing. The whole Phoenicians creating underground cities, entire civilizations underground because they were terrified that this adopted planet that they had partially colonized was going to get whammed into as well. A legitimate concern when you come from Mars, which has been destroyed and wrecked by some kind of celestial, either a nuclear war according to Brandenburg or some celestial bombardment according to Hancock, possibly both actually, because with Steve Preston, World War Zero, he makes the point that Earth was hammered by celestial bombardment and had a nuclear war. So it could have actually been both in the case of Mars. It certainly was on Earth, if Steve Preston is to be believed. It's like one just followed right on the heels of the other.
And,
So
I mean, and they're all things. These aren't to a point they're theories, but they're not hypotheses. These are things that happened, and people are proposing answers as to why. you've said that the answers are on Mars. Obviously, it's a long way away. It's a lot of money. The most obvious things pointing towards is things like Atlantis, which people are finding things every day under the
Oh yeah, of
sea.
course. There's
Maybe
loads of
it's
things to
not
find.
Atlantis. Maybe is the next thing Atlantis? Is the next thing maybe looking at the second Atlantis, which I had never heard of, which is in the Pacific?
Lemuria.
Would you
Yeah.
find our answers there, or do you feel those answers have to be on Mars?
No, the answers are on every planet, I would suggest, that has been colonized in the past. And that includes also Venus, but Venus would be a hell of a challenge.
Yeah.
But, the moon, there's so much on the moon, that Hoagland talks about in Dark Mission and talks about in his interviews um, with Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM. Definitely check them all out. Check the ones out that I've posted already on my channel. Check out the ones in the future. Like I say, it's a fucking crime that this guy never wrote a book. At least one. Yeah, I mean, he did write one with Mike Bara, Dark Mission, but it was mostly written by Mike Bara. Let's be honest. With Richard Hoagland's kind of help. And don't just think on the surface level. Look at what's beneath these planets, and look at what Lou Baldwin was saying with Mars and the Lost Planet Man. It sounds very out there, and it's presented as a novel, so whether you can take it seriously or not is debatable. But I tend to take it seriously because I lean on that side. Brian Desborough, what he says, and They Cast No Shadows, what David Icke says, and The Biggest Secret, what Brinsley Lapointe Trench says, and The Sky People, and Temple of the Stars. You have to put it all together. There's not one source you can turn to. There's not one author you can turn to for all the answers. You have to look at all of them. You have to look at all the authors for part of the answer, not one author for all the answers, is what I
And
would
this is
suggest.
cutting out that bullshit and putting the important bits together. You think?
Well, that's a lifetime's work. I
Plan.
just
That's what you're trying to
it's
do.
Yeah. I mean, luckily I'm still fairly young. I'm still in my 30s, barely, but I still am in my 30s, and I've thankfully not waited too long to take on this challenge. But it will
It's a
take a long time.
it is a huge challenge, and I think it's a very noble one. It is the first question: where do we come from?
Mhm.
And the only thing I will say about the moon, I can't say too much about it. I know someone who uh, is an engineer whose specific job. I'm trying to be very careful what I'm saying here, which I'm not normally with you, as you know, but um, whose specific job is engineering on the moon, sorry, not Martian, lunar applications for engineering, and that's a very rare job, put it that way. And he a very intelligent guy. I mean, we met. There was some guys on the History Channel, which you can look it up. They'd got this B-17 Flying Fortress, and they were rebuilding it and putting it back together, and there's a lot of plans that are lost, a lot of things need homologating. And my friend Dave was we actually met them in a hotel in Inverness, and it was a massive deal. They were on like I said, History Channel, a few other things, and I was like, I know who that is. We went over there and we were end up having endless beers with these American guys who were rebuilding this flying fortress. I think they did a bit of work for them as well on voluntary basis, because he's a great engineer, aerospace and what have you. But his particular thing was lunar applications for engineering, and things we know and things we don't know, and how that actually works. It just sounds like the most fascinating job in the world. So people are looking into this. You can build, as he said to me, you can build things on the moon easily because it has far less gravity. So you don't need a massive piece of kit to lift this thing because it doesn't weigh anything. And so therefore it's actually a manufacturing paradise. And people are genuinely looking at this stuff. And this is going back, I don't know, 5, 6 years that we were doing all this. But there's something there. I think this is one of the things uh, I love to pick your brains on this and to learn stuff, because there's always something there. You're not saying, here's some crazy idea I've had, like Ike and alien lizard people, or whomever, or Coleman's Beaumont talking about how Britain was essentially ancient Israeli territory or what have you, and how the entire Bible was set in the UK. I think he just listened to Jerusalem too many times. Um, but I think it's
Possibly.
something really important here to say, and I enjoy that you're saying it, because you're not an evangelist. If anything, you're the opposite to an evangelist. You're sort of you will call it bollocks if it's bollocks.
Well, no idea is too crazy for me to entertain.
Yeah,
I'll listen. Is it like Aristotle says thousands of years ago? The mark of an educated mind is to entertain ideas without necessarily accepting them.
yeah.
In other words,
No, I
the
get that.
ability to compartmentalize.
And so, if any of obviously your followers follow you for what you get, if any of my followers said, "Okay, look, Rick trusts this guy. We're looking at what he's doing.
Hmm.
Uh, what can they expect, and where would they find you?" That's probably my last question. Where should they find you, engage with you, and what can they expect is coming up?
Well, thanks to you, you finally persuaded me to join the dark side and join X or Twitter. So I'll be posting on there. I'll post this video on X and I'll repost it to you so you can promote it amongst your own followers and your own groups and all this kind of thing. So I'm on YouTube, Cosmic Apocrypha. The subtitle is True Human History because I couldn't settle on one title or the other, so I just kind of went with both. The final point I would make is that Hancock is right, but he doesn't go far enough. That's the trouble with Hancock. He never goes far enough. He's right in saying that we are a species with amnesia. But more than that, I would actually embrace what Michael Tazarian says. I'll go further. I'd say that we are a race not only with amnesia, but with trauma. And it is the deep, unresolved psychological trauma that's bringing us down. Look at the rise of mental illness in society today. It's gone off the fucking cliff.
It's
Off the
been huge.
cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we are a race living not just with amnesia, but with subconscious, psychological, deep-rooted trauma, which I would say Hancock is absolutely on the right path when he's talking about in the back half of the Mars mystery, all the times that Earth has been impacted by comets or asteroids or meteorites. Every time that happens, it has an effect. It has a toll. It stacks up. You yourself, I believe, suffer from PTSD. Traumatic effects do have a deep, long-lasting effect on people individually and collectively. They do, and this cannot be ignored. It has to be addressed. The only way, this is the objective, this is why I do all this, because you have to confront the source of your trauma, not just individually but collectively, and not just collectively but also individually. If you don't confront your trauma, it remains unresolved and it will manifest in ways that are unpredictable and ugly, and it has to be resolved. And the only way to resolve it is to unpack it. And the only way to unpack it is to be honest about it and face it. Sometimes you have to face the truth naked, completely exposed, figuratively, literally, emotionally, spiritually, and sorry if I'm getting a little bit personal by mentioning your PTSD. I apologize if I wasn't meant to mention that, but
That's fine. I've always been very open about PTSD. I've had it for 25 years, so I'm very open about it. But no, I get it. I mean, I look forward to the things you do because you look at things that a lot of people aren't looking at and go, "This is important." And actually, you can tie it to things like the Second World War, like whatever. So, like World War Zero. I mean, I'm a historian. I proposed the World War Zero idea, but you've taken this, and it's a thing. I gave you other people's research. I said, look, I know this guy's good and this guy's man, but look at this, and there's actually a working theory there. And I think it's academic history. It's just not your mainstream history. It's not how the Tudors lived or something like that, which is mind-numbingly boring. I mean, this is actually very exciting stuff, and a lot of stuff has come about even when we were kids growing up, it was like, this will never be a thing. And now it's a thing. You've got people saying in Congress saying that Martians and well, not Martians, but alien life exists, and that we're in contact with them, and we're doing this and we're doing that, and that this is, and it goes back to Werner von Braun, and it goes back to Christ knows so many things. It's a huge subject, and I mean, like I said, it takes I know what work dedication is. It takes a historian like yourself who doesn't sleep. So
I never sleep.
I'm sure we will pass if you're interested in what Blair does. When he finally is taken off to, when he's finally incarcerated in the rubber room, I'll give you.
I'm sure that'll happen at some point.
I will post address details. You can send him send him nice wishes, but
send him a book.
But unfortunately, it's something that you do. Well, I know that you, because you take on a subject and you run with it. You do not sleep. Whereas I'm the king of the 3 hour power nap, and I know I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I start writing, and then I'm out for the afternoon. Then I get up and I run again. But you don't. You keep going. I mean, you're the juggernaut of history. You just keep plowing through it.
Thanks.
And there's not a lot of subjects. What I like is there's not a lot of subjects you won't touch, because so many historians listen to me. I didn't know the answer, so I didn't pose the question. That's not in history. So the fact that you are going, sod it, let's do this, let's do that. This is the biggest question. Why are we ignoring it? Let's hit that one. It's actually exciting. It's daunting. I wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's you. I'm very glad it's you.
I've got nothing to lose, though.
Well, this is true. I'm in
a position where I can lose nothing.
No, and literally. I think the great thing is you're not trying to be rich. You're not trying to be famous. You're not trying to. You hate the concept of being popular. I know. You're just like, leave me alone. Let me do my work. So, you're not selling artist. Yeah, you're not selling anything, and I think that's one of the greatest ideas behind people. When I wrote, and forgive me again for mentioning First Casualty, which she's an old book, she still sells a stack load. And I wrote it because I believed what I was writing, and I believed it was a story that needed to be told, and the guys in it had really affected me, But I'd have written Casualty if I didn't earn any money. But it has earned a fair bit of money, and that's really good. And I First Casualty spawned a career as a historian and author. But a lot of people go, trying to sell a book, so coming out with grandiose claims. That's what people do. You see,
forget all that shit. You're always gonna have detractors. Just got to ignore all that crap.
But you know me. You know that I'm integrous, that I just couldn't do that. I'm not just going to write bullshit to sell a book. The truth is always better. That's why history is history. It's because it's brilliant, because it's people, and people are crazy and well. But you're not trying to take anyone's money off them. I think this is.
I mean, all the stuff I put on my channel is free. I should probably set up a Patreon, to be honest. But I
mean, there's a thing. I've not put any of my accounts on any online forum as paid for or subscripted or Patreon or what have you, because I never want people to say you're in it to earn money, or just because all the historian has is integrity. That's all we have. That is the difference between, and I like this because it's actually a good place to end, because it is the difference between you being a good historian who can apply yourself ultra religiously to your subject and find out the answers and disseminate the bullshit, without going down the rabbit hole and saying you must believe my new religion or whatever. That's why I trust you with this subject, because most go, here's this and it means this is the new thing, and you're not. You're just going, look, here's the thing, let's ask the damn question. And if you don't like the answer, ask the question again, or ask a different question. And I like it because you're not selling anything. And I think that's an incredible point. I have to justify what I write because people buy the books and it costs them money. And someone buys my books, I want to walk away with something that nobody else has got, nobody else knows, and they're the most informed mofo in the world, and they're loving it, and they're loving the experience, and they can come back to it time and again, and they can reference this. They've got something nobody else has got, and that is the hallmark of the books that I write. If I can't write anything new or original, I don't do it, and if I can't back it up, I don't do it. But if I can't back it up, I'll ask the question, and I'll say, here is a question I do not know the answer, because I want someone else to pick that up and run with it, which is largely how First Casualty started, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you're not selling anything. You're doing an incredible job here because you believe there's something that we're not being told. And whether you look into flat earthers, whether you look into prices, some weird ones I can't even name, or whether you look into some very logical people who say, okay, so what's on the moon? What's on Mars? Someone's not telling the truth. Why aren't they telling the truth? That's all I want to know. You're appealing to those people because you want to know. You're them.
Well, just what I'll say on the closing note to answer your question earlier on, I'm actually working on 3 things right now. I'm working on the Mars Mystery with Graham Hancock. I'm working on actually I'm working on 4 things now I think about it. So I've got Hancock with the Mars Mystery. I'm also working on sections out of The Great Deception by Commons Beaumont. I'm working on a couple of things out of When Scotland Was Jewish to do with Kabbalism and all this kind of thing. And I'm going to start working on The Mysterious Comet as well with Beaumont. So that's actually 4 things in the pipeline that I've got working. Also, there's Dark Mission as well. That's really actually 5 things. The only regret is that I actually have to break away from this stuff sometimes to do a regular job, and I'm thinking about this stuff all day.
Historian, isn't it? No one pays you for research, any results.
Also, I would also say the book that you were referring to earlier on that I've always got kind of in the back of my head and not got around to writing, is set in the era of the First Scottish War of Independence. It's kind of a working title I got in my head. I was thinking about calling it The Life of War. And hopefully this winter I'll be able to get beasted into that and maybe get the first volume done by the end of the winter, or maybe like a first draft or something like that. But I do enjoy writing fiction as well. It's been in the back of my head for like 5 years, and yet something always seems to get in the way of me writing it. But I'm glad that you enjoy it. So, thanks very much.
I've read the drafts and looked over it. I really liked them. I mean, I'm too literal. I can't do fiction faction. I worked with the fiction faction authors and I've done the historical bits, but I can't portray something that uses, weirdly enough, that uses imagination. The will's a suspension of disbelief. I struggle with that, but no, I've always enjoyed your writing. I would love to read your writing on this subject, because I think that there is a certain passion and that you have a certain way of doing it which leaves people under no illusions. You're not wanting them to believe something, just there is a question here that's unanswered. And not only that, but someone else has covered up that answer. So why? Let's have it. And it's a very fearless quest for history. So I'm really enjoying, that I want to read, as well as your more regular, say, Scottish Wars of Independence history and that kind of thing. I would love to read what you've got going on here. And it's huge. I mean, it's successive books. This is, otherwise it'd be like a telephone book that no one will buy. So I'm really interested in that, and I'm hoping that your viewers and my viewers and readers will realize why we're having this conversation, because it's exciting stuff. It's interesting. It's stuff we don't know. It's why you do history. With that in mind, I mean, I'm absolutely hopeful for the response, and why people are wondering why 2 mates who are historians who do totally different things are mates and are having this conversation, because it'd be so boring if we were both Falklands War historians. So,
well, I've said this many times, Ricky. Your books on the Falklands War are the ultimate authority on that conflict, and I've said it all along, and I'll say it till the day I die. Your works on the Falklands War are unrivaled, unparalleled, unmatched, and unequaled. They are the best, the absolute best.
I'm gonna sob. You're gonna. I'm really excited to see what comes out of this. I do hope.
Thank you.
It's been about 2 hours, so I'm hoping anyone following me, give Blair a follow. You don't have to Love his stuff. He'd had to blow sunshine up his arse. He doesn't want that, but he's
Yeah.
asking massive questions, and I really, really want to know the answers. And he's the only one brave enough to run down this rabbit hole and not lose himself. So
Well,
if
no one else is.
following,
It's like in the movie, when the kid says to John McClane, "Why are you doing this?" Because he says, "Because there's no one else doing it right now. If there was someone
yeah,
else to do it, I'll let them do it. But no one else is doing it, so we're doing it.
I
No
agree.
one else is doing it, so it falls to me.
I
It falls to me
agree.
to do it as best as I can."
And you're one of these people who don't mind the ass kicking. If someone goes, "Yeah, mate, you're a conspiracy theorist," you go, "Great, shut off. You're not going to get this. Let's keep asking those questions." I like it. I really do
Yeah,
like it. I like brave history. I like new history. I like people who aren't, let's write a book about the Battle of Waterloo and say something fresh about it. You're asking massive questions. You're going to hit me. What are you going to do? I'm loving it. So with that
I
in
appreciate
mind, and if people are following me and go, sod it, yeah, go on. Rick says, let's follow this guy. Let's follow this guy. Give
it.
Blair a follow. Ask me where you can hit him, where you can hit him up.
Yeah.
And if you got something to add, come on the Cosmo Apocrypha podcast. Add something to it. There's loads of people who follow me who are so into this kind of thing as well. They are not mutually exclusive. Military history and where the hell did we come from are very much open. And there's even a whole undiscovered war to go on, which is World War Zero, which I really want to know more about. So
My parting thought is that the answers are actually out there, if you care to look, and there's nothing hidden. There's some things are only hidden temporarily, but nothing is hidden forever, and the truth will come out in the end. This is the age of revealing and revelation. I'm just one spoke in the wheel, as is Ricky. Ricky focuses on the Falkland Wars. I focus on Mars and Atlantis. We have different areas of focus, but fundamentally, our ideologies and our objectives are the same. Get to the
yeah,
bottom of it, get to the truth, and the truth will win out in the end.
beautiful. Really, really appreciate your time.
You too. Thanks
Have a
very much, Ricky. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've been giving me all this praise. I feel like I've come up short because I haven't been able to reciprocate. But your books are absolutely amazing. You've been my best friend for years now, and I don't know
yeah,
what the hell I would do without you, mate. You're like a brother to me, and you always have been.
thank you, and likewise. Um,
Yeah.
get some sleep tonight. That's what all the audience want is you to get some sleep tonight. You know it can happen. It can
Yeah.
start now.
Well, I'm gonna have a couple of beers and relax, and it's been an absolute honor. It's been an absolute pleasure, Ricky. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, mate. Take care of yourself.
You too. Take care.